Okay, so for the second part of this lesson, last thing I asked you to do was to do your activities in the worksheet, so a couple of pages in there. To see if you're correct in what you wrote in your worksheet, you need to go and have a look at the presentation. So you should be in study directory, and if you go into first year remote lessons, go into this week, which is the 23rd, and you'll find the presentation. In there, slide number 10, you'll see the worked version of your worksheet. So go ahead and check if you got those test data right. So that's slide 10 in there. Okay, you can pause the video and do that. Now we're going to have a go and look at some testing that's been done so we can work out the best way to do it. You're going to be doing this later on. And for this exercise, you'll need the Bouncy Castle database, the latest version. So this is the version that you did the report in the previous lesson. If you didn't do the report, then you'll need to go to study directory and download the latest version of Bouncy Castle and do the links. The validation is here in the study directory. You'll find a link to this document, and you need to just make sure you do all the validation that it tells you in here before you can do the testing. So again, pause your video, and if you could do that validation now. Once the validation is done, then you can go ahead and test it. So here are some tests, and I've got some screenshots to help you understand it. So the first test is to test the structure of validation of your relational database. And this is the general instructions that you'd get on a paper or a teacher set assessment. And it says testing your relational database using suitable, important word, test data, normal, erroneous, or extreme. You know what they are now. You must provide evidence of table level testing, which means we're just testing validation rules and table bits and pieces like field lengths, input masks, etc. So the first test is a record will not be saved without the first line of the address being present. So this means that we were asked to do a validation rule, which is and is not null. So we're just basically testing that. So this is the completed template. And you can see here that I've indicated it's test number 1 because it is. And I've worked out that this is erroneous data. So the R here indicates erroneous data. Oh, that's annoying. Okay, and we're back. Right, so the R indicates that it's erroneous data. Now in this column, in the template, you can see it's called test data. I've typed in all the test data that will go here in the record in the database. So you have to type in the whole set of test data for that record that you're testing. In my case, I'm testing a presence check, so it's blank. So here it's a blank thing, and you can see I've left it blank when I've typed it in. I've also, if you look through this slideshow one at a time, I've also widened the columns so I can put my screenshot in and it can be seen. That was one of the biggest complaints from the examiners in the last session, that the screenshots are too small. So you need to widen up the column in the table. Then you've typed in the test data, and here you can see you've written in exactly what you would expect to happen. So it's very specific. Have a read of how that's written. It's very specific. Once you've done that, you put in the screenshot, and it should show that you've got a helpful and useful validation text message. And that's all you have to do. This column at the end is only going to be used if a test does not work, and you'll show how you fix it in there. And I've got one example to help you. So that is the first test. So now here's the second test, and it is a record will not be saved if the postcode is an incorrect format. So on this part of your database, you would have put an input mask, and the input mask would have ensured that the correct format of data postcode was put in. So here you can see that this is erroneous data, which is the R. And again, I've typed in all the test data that I'm going to be adding to my database. And you can see that I've put it in highlighted here, that I've put in the postcode in the incorrect format. It shouldn't work. So I've done a screenshot showing that I do get an error message. I've tried to type it in, but because I've got an input mask, it won't let me. And I've got an error message to prove that. So that's simply all you have to do in there. Third test, a record will not save if the days required are greater than the accepted range. And in the validation rule, it was greater than 0 and less than 14. So in this one, this is clearly going to be extreme data that we're testing. So extreme data has got an X to indicate what type of data it is. And again, I've typed in all of the data that will be typed in across here. So because, if we just go back, because the range was between 0 and less than 14, sensible extreme data would be the number 14. So I've typed in 14, and because I've got a validation rule, I've got an error message. So that's it. And again, expected results, you very clearly explain what you expect to happen. I hope that makes sense so far. And you can see extreme data had to be the correct data type. So that's 14. It had to be a number. Let's have a look at the next one. Next test, a record would only save if the date of delivery is after the current day. Makes sense? So this looks scary when you first have a look at this, but it's not. So extreme data would have been appropriate for this because we're looking at the end of a range. So I've typed in what I will type into my database and explained what will happen. So then I typed it in and no error message appeared. And therefore the test data failed there. So it's accepted that data. So straight away, we know that our validation rule is either not there or it's wrong. So in my final column, which is the only time you use it is when you have a failed test, I've explained that the test failed. And then I've explained that I went to check the validation rule. And I've got a screenshot here, which shows that it's completely the wrong validation rule and is accepting invalid data. I've then explained what I did to change it. And I explained that I retested the same data. And here are the screenshots, or even screenshots. So there's the incorrect validation rule. Here it is having been fixed. And here is a test when I've run it again, and it has created an error message this time. So this is an example of what to do if, when you're testing, it doesn't go as expected. Now, an activity for you. So you hopefully have now validated your Bouncy Castle database, and now you're going to have a go at testing your Bouncy Castle database. These are the 6 tests that you're going to be doing, and the activity has been set for you in Google Classroom. I'll show you where to find another version of this. Also on Study Directory, you've got this link here to that same document, which tells you what the... Okay, in Google Classroom, you've got the assignment, and in there you've got a copy of the instructions for what you need to test, you've got what you need to validate, and you've got a copy of the template so you can have a go at testing. In the presentation, which is on Study Directory, it gives you a hand with the first few tests, so you can get a feel for it, make sure you're completing them in the template, but those will give you a hand as to how to do the first few. Then you need to just complete the 6 tests that have been given to you, and then make sure you submit the bouncy castle testing assignment by the time and date that you've been set.